She was just a base hairdresser until 52 enemy fighters surrounded captured SEALs. Maria Santos had been cutting hair at Forward Operating Base Phoenix for 8 months, and in that time, she had perfected the art of being invisible. The soldiers who sat in her chair saw exactly what they expected to see: a quiet civilian contractor with steady hands and a forgettable face. They talked around her like she was furniture, discussing missions and operations while she trimmed their hair and nodded politely. What they did not see was the way her eyes tracked every detail of their conversations. They did not notice how she memorized patrol routes mentioned in passing, or how she cataloged the tactical capabilities described during casual banter. Most importantly, they had no idea that the woman running clippers through their hair possessed skills that would make their most elite operators look like amateurs. Maria had built this carefully constructed facade over years of practice. She moved through the base with the unremarkable efficiency of someone whose job was to provide a service and disappear. She kept her personal quarters Spartan, her social interactions minimal, and her background stories simple enough to be boring. Just another contractor looking to make decent money in a dangerous place. The morning everything changed started like any other. Maria opened her small salon at 0600 hours, arranged her tools with practiced precision, and prepared for another day of listening to soldiers talk while she made them look presentable. The first appointment was scheduled for 0630, but that appointment would never happen. At 0615 hours, the base alarm system erupted with the urgent tones that meant immediate threat. Maria looked up from her preparations to see soldiers running past her window, their faces tight with the controlled urgency that meant serious trouble. Through the chaos, she caught fragments of radio chatter. SEAL team missing, coordinates compromised, enemy contact confirmed. She moved to her window and watched as the base transformed from routine operations to crisis response. Vehicles were being prepped for emergency deployment. Medical teams were staging equipment, and officers were gathering in clusters around communication equipment. Something had gone very wrong during what should have been a routine extraction operation. Maria felt something shift inside her chest, a familiar sensation she had not experienced in months. The careful civilian facade began to crack as instincts she had spent years suppressing started to surface. She found herself analyzing the base response with eyes that saw tactical weaknesses and operational gaps rather than the organized chaos most civilians would perceive. Maria locked her salon door and moved with purpose toward the operations center. Her civilian contractor badge would not get her inside, but she knew other ways to gather intelligence. Years of careful observation had taught her the rhythm of Forward Operating Base Phoenix, and right now, that rhythm was completely disrupted. She positioned herself near the communications hub where officers were coordinating the response effort. Through the open doorway, she could hear the grim details emerging from field reports. Team Delta, a 6-man SEAL unit, had been conducting a routine extraction mission in the Kandahar province when their operation was compromised. Instead of retrieving their intelligence asset, they had walked into a carefully prepared ambush. The enemy had demonstrated detailed knowledge of SEAL tactics and operational procedures. They had positioned themselves perfectly to cut off all escape routes while maintaining cover from air support. Most troubling of all, they had taken the entire team alive, which meant this was not a random encounter, but a planned capture operation designed to maximize intelligence value and propaganda impact. Colonel Morrison was coordinating the response from the operations center, his voice carrying the controlled tension of an officer dealing with his worst nightmare. We have confirmed visual on 6 friendlies in enemy custody. They are being held in a fortified position approximately 40 kilometers northeast of their last known coordinates. Enemy strength is estimated at 50 to 60 fighters with crew, served weapons, and prepared defensive positions. Maria felt her pulse quicken as she processed the tactical situation. The enemy had chosen their position well. The mountainous terrain would make conventional rescue operations extremely difficult while providing multiple defensive advantages to the occupying force. Any direct assault would likely result in the execution of all hostages before friendly forces could reach them. The base response was following predictable patterns. Air support was being scrambled, but weather conditions were marginal for close air support operations. Ground forces were being assembled, but the enemy position was located in terrain that would require hours of movement under observation. Quick reaction forces were staging equipment, but their operational capabilities were limited by the same geographical constraints that had trapped Team Delta. Maria listened to the planning discussions with growing frustration. Every proposed solution followed conventional military doctrine, which meant every approach would be anticipated by an enemy that had already demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning. The officers were thinking like institutional military leaders rather than adaptive operators, and that institutional thinking was going to get 6 good men killed. Maria returned to her quarters and opened a footlocker that had remained untouched for 8 months. Beneath layers of civilian clothing and personal items lay equipment that told a very different story about who Maria Santos really was. The carefully arranged contents represented capabilities that exceeded anything currently available to forward operating base Phoenix. The primary item was a custom rifle system that had been designed for operations requiring extreme precision at extended range. The weapon broke down into components that could be concealed within seemingly innocent civilian luggage, but when assembled, it represented one of the most advanced sniper platforms ever developed. Maria had used this rifle to eliminate targets at ranges that most military snipers would consider impossible. Beside the rifle lay supporting equipment that revealed the true scope of her operational background. Night vision optics that surpassed military standard issue. Communication gear that could access encrypted channels used by elite special operations units. Medical supplies designed for treating combat trauma in field conditions. Every item had been selected and tested during operations that officially never existed. Maria had spent 5 years as part of a unit that did not appear on any organizational chart. Their missions took them to places where conventional military forces could not operate, facing threats that required solutions outside normal tactical doctrine. She had eliminated targets in 17 countries while maintaining cover identities that allowed her to disappear into civilian populations. The decision to leave that life had not been voluntary. A mission in Eastern Europe had been compromised by intelligence failures that cost lives and exposed her team to political consequences. Rather than face congressional hearings and media attention, she had been offered a choice: retirement with a new identity or court-martial for operations that could not be publicly acknowledged. Maria had chosen retirement and spent 2 years learning to become someone forgettable. The hairdresser identity was perfect cover because it provided legitimate reason to be on military installations while requiring no background that could be easily verified. She had convinced herself that this quiet life was what she wanted, that she was done with the violence and complexity of her former existence. But listening to the tactical discussions at Forward Operating Base Phoenix had awakened something she thought she had successfully buried. 6 elite operators were facing execution because conventional military doctrine was inadequate for an unconventional threat. The enemy had counted on institutional limitations preventing effective response, and they were going to be proven correct unless someone was willing to operate outside those limitations. Maria began checking her equipment with the systematic precision that had kept her alive through operations that should have been impossible. Maria assembled her rifle with movements that had been practiced until they became automatic. Each component locked into place with the precise timing that marked the difference between adequate training and operational mastery. The weapon that emerged was a tool designed for situations where failure meant the death of people who deserved better than institutional limitations. She loaded her equipment into a civilian hiking pack that would attract no attention from base security. The rifle components were distributed among seemingly innocent items, while the specialized gear was concealed within compartments that appeared to contain personal supplies. Years of operational experience had taught her that the best cover was always the most boring truth. Maria left Forward Operating Base Phoenix through a maintenance gate that was monitored but not actively guarded. Her contractor status provided legitimate reason to be moving around the installation, and her 8 months of unremarkable behavior had established patterns that made her invisible to routine security procedures. She was just another civilian contractor handling personal business during off hours. The terrain surrounding the base offered multiple routes toward the enemy position, but Maria chose a path that would keep her concealed while providing optimal positioning for long-range engagement. The mountains of Kandahar province were unforgiving, but they also provided advantages for someone who understood how to use elevation and concealment effectively. Maria moved through the darkness with a quiet efficiency that had made her valuable to units that operated beyond conventional boundaries. Every step was planned to minimize noise and visual signature while maintaining progress toward her objective. She covered ground at a pace that would have challenged soldiers half her age while carrying equipment that weighed more than most people could manage. The enemy position was 40 kilometers from forward operating base Phoenix, but Maria was not planning a direct approach. Her operational experience had taught her that the best solutions often came from directions that conventional thinking would never consider. While base commanders were planning complex operations involving multiple units and extensive coordination, she was preparing to solve the problem with precision application of individual capability. The night was clear with minimal wind, perfect conditions for long-range precision work. Maria reached her selected position 3 hours before dawn, giving her time to establish a hide site and conduct detailed reconnaissance of the enemy positions. Through her scope, she could see the defensive arrangements that had been carefully prepared to defeat conventional rescue attempts. The enemy commander had positioned his forces well, but he had made one critical assumption that would prove fatal. He had planned for military response using military doctrine, but he had not planned for someone willing to operate without institutional constraints. Through her scope, Maria surveyed the enemy position with the analytical precision that had kept her alive through impossible operations. The 6 members of Team Delta were kneeling in the center of the enemy formation, hands bound behind their backs, while 52 fighters maintained defensive positions around the perimeter. The tactical situation was exactly as dire as the intelligence reports had indicated. The enemy commander had arranged his forces to maximize defensive advantages while minimizing rescue opportunities. Heavy weapons were positioned to cover all likely approach routes, while riflemen occupied elevated positions that provided overlapping fields of fire. Radio operators maintained communication with external support, and sentries watched for any sign of incoming friendly forces. But looking at the setup, Maria realized that conventional approaches would not work. These fighters were too disciplined, too well prepared. Any direct assault would result in immediate execution of the hostages before rescue forces could close the distance. The enemy had counted on this tactical reality to make their position essentially unassailable through normal military operations. Maria needed a different approach, something that would eliminate the threat completely and quickly enough that the enemy would not have time to react. She needed to do what she had always done best: solve impossible problems through precise application of individual capability rather than institutional doctrine. She began identifying targets through her scope with the systematic methodology that had made her valuable to units that operated beyond conventional boundaries. First priority was the enemy commander, whose elimination would disrupt coordination and decision-making. Second priority included fighters with crew, served weapons, and radio operators who could call for reinforcements or coordinate defensive responses. Third priority covered perimeter guards who could provide early warning of her activities. Maria mapped out a shooting sequence that would eliminate 23 key targets in under 90 seconds, while the remaining fighters were still trying to understand where the shots were coming from. It was a sequence that required precision and timing that exceeded normal human capabilities. The shot sequence was technically impossible by conventional standards. Too many targets, too little time, too much precision required across varying ranges and angles. But impossible had been a routine part of her previous operational life, and the stakes made hesitation unacceptable. 6 elite operators were facing execution because no one else was willing to attempt what conventional wisdom declared undoable. Maria controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow to the familiar rhythm that marked the difference between adequate marksmanship and legendary capability. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, not applying pressure, just maintaining contact while waiting for the perfect moment to begin the sequence that would either save 6 lives or confirm her own death. The enemy commander raised his hand, signaling something to his troops. Execution was about to begin. Maria fired. The suppressed rifle made a sound like someone coughing. 800 meters away, the enemy commander's head snapped back, and he dropped instantly. Before his body hit the ground, Maria had already acquired her second target. The fighter standing next to him was trying to process what had just happened. Another shot, another body dropping. The enemy position erupted in chaos. Fighters were shouting, looking around wildly, trying to identify where the shots were coming from. But suppressed rifle fire is nearly impossible to locate, especially in mountain terrain where sound bounces and echoes unpredictably. Maria worked through her target sequence with mechanical precision that had been refined through operations spanning 17 countries. The machine gunner on the eastern perimeter, the radio operator trying to call for reinforcements, the lieutenant attempting to organize a response. 23 shots, 90 seconds, 23 enemy fighters eliminated before they even understood they were under attack. Each shot was placed with the precision that separated adequate snipers from legendary ones. But Maria was not finished. The mathematics had changed. 52 fighters minus 23 still left 29 between her and Team Delta. Too many to handle with precision shooting alone, especially with the remaining fighters now alert and seeking cover. Time to implement the second phase of her operational plan. Maria packed her rifle and moved position, circling around to the northern approach where terrain features would provide concealment for close quarters engagement. She had brought more than just a sniper rifle. The equipment cache contained tools for exactly this kind of situation. Flashbang grenades, smoke canisters, and one very special piece of equipment she had been saving for emergency use. The portable jammer would disrupt all radio communications within a 2-kilometer radius, cutting the remaining fighters off from external support and preventing coordination of their defensive response. Maria activated the device and positioned it in the valley where it would be difficult for the enemy to locate while maintaining maximum effectiveness. Immediately, all enemy fighter radios went dead. They could not call for reinforcement, could not coordinate their response, could not do anything but react to immediate threats as they developed. The tactical situation had shifted from organized defense to individual survival, exactly the conditions Maria needed for the next phase of her rescue operation. She became the threat they could not identify, coordinate against, or effectively counter using conventional defensive procedures. Maria moved down from the hills like a ghost, using smoke grenades to create cover and confusion among the remaining 29 fighters. The enemy position had transformed from organized defense to chaotic survival as fighters struggled to protect the hostages while defending against threats they could not identify or locate effectively. The remaining fighters were scattered, disorganized, trying to maintain security around Team Delta while responding to an unknown number of attackers from an unknown direction. Their radios were dead, their command structure was eliminated, and their defensive positions had become isolated islands in a tactical situation that was deteriorating rapidly. Maria exploited their confusion with the systematic precision that had made her valuable to units operating beyond conventional boundaries. She would appear from the smoke, eliminate 2 or 3 fighters with precise shots, then disappear before they could respond. The enemy kept firing at shadows, wasting ammunition and revealing their positions to someone who understood how to use their panic against them. Through it all, the 4 members of Team Delta remained exactly where they were, bound and kneeling, but now watching with professional interest as someone systematically dismantled their captor's defensive position. These were elite operators who understood tactical situations, and they recognized that their rescue was being conducted by someone whose capabilities exceeded normal special operation standards. "Whoever you are," muttered Petty Officer Rodriguez under his breath, "you are my new favorite person." The systematic elimination of enemy positions was being conducted with a level of precision and tactical awareness that impressed soldiers who had thought they had seen everything during their elite military careers. Maria worked her way closer to the center of the enemy position, eliminating fighters one by one while maintaining concealment within the smoke and confusion she had created. The remaining fighters were firing at movements and sounds, but they were hitting nothing while steadily losing personnel to an opponent they could not see or effectively engage. The smoke was thick now, visibility reduced to a few meters, perfect conditions for close-quarters combat against a disorganized enemy that had lost all tactical cohesion. Maria found herself approaching the final defensive perimeter where 3 fighters were guarding Team Delta directly, their weapons trained on the hostages rather than searching for external threats. They saw her emerge from the smoke, raise their weapons toward this new threat, and Maria moved with the fluid precision that had kept her alive through operations that should have been impossible. Years of close combat training took over, muscle memory refined through situations where hesitation meant death. She rolled left, avoiding the first burst of automatic fire, came up on one knee, and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. 3 fighters eliminated in under 2 seconds, precision that demonstrated capabilities beyond normal military training standards. "Well, that was impressive," observed Chief Petty Officer Blake, the second in command of Team Delta. Maria moved to the SEALs and cut their restraints with her combat knife, her movements efficient and professional as she freed each operator from the bonds that had held them captive during the systematic elimination of their guards. "Can you guys move?" Maria asked as she helped the last team member to his feet. The 6 operators were bruised and exhausted from their captivity, but their combat effectiveness had not been significantly compromised by the ordeal. They immediately began acquiring weapons from the fallen enemy fighters surrounding their former position. "Who are you?" asked Lieutenant Commander Harrison, the team leader, as he grabbed a rifle from a nearby body. His question carried the professional curiosity of an elite operator who had just witnessed capabilities that exceeded anything in his operational experience. The systematic elimination of 52 enemy fighters by a single individual was not something covered in any tactical manual. "Someone who really hates seeing good people die," Maria replied while scanning the area for remaining threats. "We could do introductions later. Right now, we need to move. There's still hostiles in the area, and our position is not secure for extended operations." "Still hostiles," laughed Petty Officer Martinez as he armed himself with an enemy weapon. "Lady, you just took out like 40 fighters single-handedly. How many could possibly be left in this entire region that would pose a threat to our movement back to friendly territory?" "8 by my count," Maria responded with the precision that marked someone who maintained situational awareness even during high-intensity combat operations. "And they are regrouping near the eastern exit route. We need to move west toward the secondary extraction point that will be less obvious to any remaining enemy forces." The 7 of them moved as a unit, the SEALs falling into formation around Maria like she was just another team member rather than a civilian contractor who had appeared from nowhere to conduct an impossible rescue operation. Their movement was professional and coordinated, covering angles and maintaining security protocols despite the unusual circumstances. They encountered 2 more enemy fighters attempting to organize a counterattack using the confusion and smoke to reposition for defensive operations. Team Delta engaged them with the professional efficiency that had made them elite operators, while Maria provided covering fire with the same precision she had demonstrated throughout the rescue operation. The engagement was brief and decisive. The remaining enemy fighters were eliminated before they could establish effective defensive positions or coordinate any meaningful response to the tactical situation that had completely shifted against them within the span of minutes. The team moved through the mountain terrain with practiced efficiency, Team Delta operating in formation, while Maria took point with the kind of tactical awareness that comes from years of operations in hostile territory. Her knowledge of the local geography was proving as valuable as her combat capabilities, guiding them along routes that avoided likely enemy positions. "We need to reach the extraction point before dawn," Maria explained as they navigated through a rocky valley that provided concealment from observation. "Enemy reinforcements will be moving into this area once they lose radio contact with a capture team, and our window for safe extraction is limited by their response time." "How did you know where to find us?" asked Petty Officer Stevens, the team medic, as they paused to check their route against the terrain features visible in the pre-dawn darkness. "The intelligence about our capture was classified at the highest levels, and civilian contractors should not have access to operational details involving SEAL team missions. I make it my business to know when good people are in trouble," Maria replied, without providing specifics about her information sources or operational background. "Sometimes the right person is in the right place at the right time, and sometimes that person has the skills necessary to make a difference in the outcome." Lieutenant Commander Harrison studied Maria with the analytical attention that elite operators applied to tactical puzzles they could not immediately solve. Her equipment, her capabilities, her tactical knowledge, and her operational awareness all suggested background that extended far beyond civilian contractor status. But questioning her identity seemed less important than completing their extraction safely. The terrain was becoming more challenging as they moved toward the extraction coordinates, requiring technical climbing skills and mountain warfare experience that most personnel did not possess. Maria navigated the difficult sections with the confidence of someone who had operated in similar environments, while Team Delta followed her lead with growing respect for her capabilities. They reached an observation point that provided visual confirmation of their extraction route. The path ahead was clear of enemy activity, but Maria remained cautious about their tactical situation. Her operational experience had taught her that the most dangerous moments often came when success seemed assured and vigilance relaxed. 2 kilometers to the extraction point, she reported while scanning the area through her scope for signs of enemy movement. "Weather conditions are favorable, and our timeline is still achievable if we maintain current pace. But we need to remain alert for the possibility that enemy forces have anticipated our extraction route and positioned assets accordingly." The team prepared for the final movement phase that would bring them to safety and conclude a rescue operation that had exceeded every expectation of what was tactically possible under the circumstances they had faced. The extraction point was a small clearing in the mountains where helicopter operations could be conducted safely despite the challenging terrain. Maria had selected coordinates that provided tactical advantages while remaining concealed from enemy observation posts that might compromise the pickup operation. Her knowledge of the local area continued to impress Team Delta with its precision and operational value. As they approached the landing zone, the distinctive sound of rotor blades could be heard echoing through the valleys, confirming that their extraction helicopter was inbound on schedule. The pilot was maintaining low-altitude flight patterns to avoid radar detection while navigating through mountain terrain that required exceptional flying skills under night conditions. Team Delta established a security perimeter around the landing zone, while Maria maintained overwatch position with a rifle, scanning for any signs of enemy forces that might have followed their movement or anticipated their extraction route. The tactical situation remained favorable, but operational experience had taught her that enemy capabilities could change rapidly during critical phases. The helicopter touched down with practiced precision, its crew chief immediately establishing communications with Lieutenant Commander Harrison while maintaining readiness for rapid departure if the tactical situation deteriorated. The aircraft was configured for special operations extraction, with equipment and crew trained for missions involving hostile territory and time-sensitive operations. "This is where we part ways," Maria told Team Delta as they prepared to board the extraction helicopter. "You have a debrief waiting at Forward Operating Base Phoenix, and there are questions that will be asked about tonight's operation that are better answered without civilian complications involved in the official records." "Wait," called Chief Petty Officer Blake as Maria began moving away from the landing zone. "We do not even know your name. You just saved 6 lives and eliminated an entire enemy force single-handedly. Command is going to want to know who conducted this rescue operation and how it was accomplished with capabilities that exceed normal operational parameters." "Maria Santos," she replied over the sound of the helicopter engines. "I cut hair at the base salon. Tonight never happened, and you were extracted by conventional special operations forces following standard tactical procedures. That story will be better for everyone involved, including your operational security and my continued effectiveness." The helicopter lifted off with Team Delta aboard, carrying them back to safety and leaving Maria alone in the mountains with equipment that needed to be concealed and a cover story that needed to be maintained. Her work was finished, but the operational requirements continued until she could return to her carefully constructed civilian identity. She watched the aircraft disappear into the darkness, then began the process of erasing all evidence of her involvement in an operation that would be remembered by 6 elite operators as the night someone impossible appeared to save their lives when conventional rescue seemed tactically unfeasible. Maria spent the next 4 hours carefully concealing all evidence of her operational activities while making her way back to Forward Operating Base Phoenix through routes that would leave no traceable record of her movement. Her equipment was disassembled and hidden in locations that could be accessed later if needed, but would never be discovered through routine security procedures. The specialized rifle was broken down into components that appeared to be innocent civilian items when properly concealed. Her tactical gear was distributed among cache sites that she had prepared during her 8 months of establishing cover identity. The radio jammer was recovered and stored in a location that provided access while maintaining operational security. By dawn, Maria was back at her quarters on Forward Operating Base Phoenix, showered and dressed in civilian clothes that matched her hairdresser cover identity. Her equipment was secured, her operational traces were eliminated, and her official alibi was established through routine activities that would be verified by multiple witnesses who had no knowledge of her actual whereabouts. She opened her salon at the normal time and began preparing for another day of cutting hair and listening to soldiers discuss their operations while remaining invisible to their attention. The transformation from elite operator back to forgettable civilian contractor was complete, practiced through years of maintaining cover identities that protected both her missions and her survival. The first soldiers to arrive were members of the Quick Reaction Force that had been prepared for conventional rescue operations that were no longer necessary. They discussed the mysterious circumstances surrounding Team Delta extraction with the kind of professional curiosity that elite units applied to tactical puzzles they could not immediately solve. Word is they were extracted by unknown friendly forces using capabilities that exceeded normal special operations parameters. One soldier mentioned while Maria trimmed his hair with steady hands. Command is calling it a classified success, but nobody knows who conducted the actual rescue operation or how it was accomplished so efficiently. Maria nodded politely and continued working, maintaining the same unremarkable demeanor that had made her invisible for 8 months. Her expression showed mild interest in military stories without demonstrating any specialized knowledge that might compromise her civilian contractor identity. Lieutenant Commander Harrison appeared in her doorway 3 hours later, studying her with the analytical attention that special operations personnel applied to tactical problems they could not solve. His presence was not routine, and his examination of her salon suggested he was looking for evidence of capabilities that exceeded her official background. "You cut hair here every day," he observed, his statement carrying implications that neither of them would discuss directly. "Been working this job for 8 months without missing a single appointment or showing any interest in military operations beyond normal civilian curiosity about base activities." Maria continued cutting hair with the same steady precision she had demonstrated for 8 months, her hands moving with practiced efficiency while Lieutenant Commander Harrison watched her work. The salon remained exactly as it had always been, unremarkable, functional, and staffed by someone whose capabilities appeared limited to civilian contracted duties. "That is correct," she replied to his observation about her routine schedule. "I take my job seriously and maintain consistent professional standards." Reliability is important when you are working with military personnel who depend on predictable services during their deployment rotations. Harrison studied her tools, her workspace, her movements, looking for any indication of the specialized capabilities he had witnessed during their extraction operation. But Maria had spent years perfecting the art of appearing ordinary, and nothing in her salon suggested abilities beyond basic cosmetology skills. "The woman who saved my team last night," he said, carefully demonstrated tactical knowledge and operational capabilities that suggested extensive special operations background. Someone with that level of training does not simply disappear without leaving traces that could be identified through proper investigation procedures. Maria met his gaze with the same polite interest she showed every customer who shared military stories while she worked. Her expression revealed nothing beyond mild curiosity about events that officially had not involved civilian personnel. The transformation from elite operator to forgettable hairdresser was complete and undetectable. "I hope your team made it back safely," she said while continuing to work. "These mountains can be dangerous, and rescue operations in hostile territory require exceptional skill and coordination. You must be very proud of the personnel who conducted such a successful mission under challenging circumstances." Lieutenant Commander Harrison recognized that he was facing someone whose operational security exceeded his ability to penetrate through direct questioning. The woman standing before him was either exactly what she appeared to be, or she was someone whose cover identity was maintained with professional skill that matched her tactical capabilities. He left the salon without obtaining the confirmation he had sought, but with respect for operational discipline that protected both missions and personnel through methods he understood, even if he could not prove them. Some questions were better left unanswered when the answers might compromise ongoing operations. Maria finished her workday at the usual time and locked her salon according to established routine. She had successfully returned to the invisible existence that protected her from attention while maintaining access to situations where her capabilities might be needed again. 6 elite operators were alive because someone had been willing to exceed institutional limitations, and that knowledge was sufficient satisfaction for work that would never be officially acknowledged or rewarded through conventional recognition systems.